My son-in-law called me on a Tuesday afternoon and told me to clear out my guest house because he was bringing 12 of his frat brothers down for what he called a business retreat. And I said, "Okay, son, come on down," because I wanted to watch him learn the difference between a man who owns a lake house and a man who built one with his own 2 hands, and 40 years of knowing exactly how the law works when you're the one who wrote half of it. He thought he was walking into a broke old preacher's cabin to throw a party for free. He had no idea. I spent 38 years as a contract attorney for the biggest construction and insurance outfits in the state of Georgia, and that the gospel I preached on Sundays wasn't the only book I knew front to back. I didn't raise my voice. I just hung up the phone, walked out onto my porch, and started writing down everything I was about to need. My name is Marcus Whitfield. I'm 66 years old. If you saw me at the hardware store in Brunswick, Georgia, buying fishing line and a bag of charcoal, you'd think I was just another retired deacon living off a small pension, driving a Ford pickup with 200,000 miles on it and a cracked windshield I never bothered to fix. That's exactly what I want you to think. It's certainly what my son-in-law Tyrell thinks. He sees an old man in suspenders who got lucky enough to inherit a piece of land on St. Simon's Sound. What he doesn't see is the $4 million sitting in a trust I built representing insurance companies against fraud claims for nearly 4 decades. Or the fact that I know exactly how a man like him operates because I spent my whole career cleaning up after men exactly like him. I was sitting on my back deck that evening, watching the tide come in slow and gold over the marsh grass, a glass of sweet tea sweating in my hand, when my phone buzzed against the porch rail. The screen lit up with the name Tyrell. My chest didn't tighten with fear. It tightened the way it does right before you have to deal with something you've been dreading for a long time, like a tooth you know is going to need pulling. I picked it up anyway. The voice on the other end was loud, with bass thumping behind it and somebody hollering in the background. "Pop?" Tyrell said he'd taken to calling me that since the day he married my daughter, like it was a nickname he'd earned instead of one he'd been handed. Me and the fellas are rolling down to the lake house this weekend. 12 of us. We need the place stocked. Steaks, liquor, the works. We're celebrating. My real estate deal finally closed. He didn't ask. He never asked. He talked like I worked for him. 12 people, I repeated, slow and even. "Yeah, Pop, it's a business retreat. Keisha told us you fixed the place up real nice on the water. Why you been hiding it from us? That's kind of selfish, you ask me. Anyway, we'll be there Friday, so get the gate code ready." Keisha. My daughter. My sweet, soft-hearted girl who could never tell that man no, not once, in the 6 years she'd been married to him. I had bought that lake house under a private family trust, specifically so it wouldn't show up under my name in any public record, because I had learned a long time ago that the moment people know what you've got, they start figuring out how to take it. But I'd made the mistake of telling Keisha about it over Sunday dinner 2 weeks back, swearing her to secrecy, and apparently secrecy in that marriage only ran one direction. I looked out over the water. The herons were settling into the reeds for the night. I realized right then that my quiet was already gone, whether I liked it or not, so I figured I might as well make it worth something. "Sure, son," I said. "Come on down. I'll get things ready." I hung up the phone, and I sat there for a long moment, turning the glass of tea in my hand, watching the condensation run down onto my fingers. Then I went inside and got my old leather folder down from the top shelf of the closet, the one I hadn't opened since I retired 4 years back. Inside it were templates, lease agreements, liability waivers, property use contracts with clauses so deeply buried in legalese that most lawyers wouldn't catch them on a first read, let alone a 31-year-old man in too much of a hurry to actually look at what he's signing. See, here's the thing about Tyrell that you need to understand. He wasn't stupid. He was something worse. He was the kind of man who believed his own confidence was a substitute for due diligence. He believed that because he talked fast and dressed sharp and could close a real estate deal on a handshake, paperwork was beneath him. Something you signed without reading, because reading was for people who didn't trust their gut. I had spent 38 years making a very comfortable living off men exactly like that. By Thursday night, I had everything printed and bound in a leather folio that looked official enough to make anybody nervous, even a man too arrogant to actually be nervous. I had drawn up what I called a recreational use and liability agreement. On the surface, It read like a standard lake house rental form, the kind you'd sign at any vacation property. Buried in Section 4, Paragraph 2, was language establishing the property as a commercial short-term rental for the weekend, governed by hospitality licensing fees, with a sliding scale of charges for occupancy beyond the listed capacity, damage assessments billed at full replacement value, plus administrative processing, and a noise and conduct clause with financial penalties triggered automatically by any call from neighbors or law enforcement. Friday afternoon, 3 SUVs came rolling up my gravel driveway, music shaking the windows before they even put the cars in park. Tyrell got out first, wearing sunglasses he didn't need since the sun was already low, a gold chain catching the light, walking up to me with his hand out like he was closing on me, not greeting me. "Pop, look at this place! You've been holding out on us." He clapped me on the shoulder. Behind him, 11 other young men piled out of the vehicles, coolers and speakers and duffel bags, already heading toward my dock like they owned it. "Welcome, son," I said, and I held out the folio. "Just need everybody to sign in before we get the party started. Insurance thing. You know how it is." Tyrell barely glanced at it. He flipped to the signature line on the back page, the way men like him always do, looking for where to put their name and nothing else. Yeah, whatever, Pop. You're always so by the book." He signed with a flourish, didn't even ask for a copy, and waved his boys forward to sign behind him, one after another. 12 signatures collected in under 4 minutes, every single one of them legally binding. I want you to know I felt something close to peace in that moment. Not anger, peace. The peace of a man who has set a trap correctly and watched it close on its own. The first 2 hours were loud, the way I expected. Music rattling off the water, somebody cannonballing off my dock, a grill smoking with more meat than I'd seen since my own son's wedding. I sat on the porch with my tea, and I watched, and I waited, because I knew Tyrell, and I knew what was coming the moment the noise complaint clock started ticking. It came around 9:30. My neighbor Earl, who'd lived 2 properties down for 20 years and had my number on speed dial, called the sheriff's non-emergency line about the noise, same as he'd done for every loud teenager party on this stretch of the Sound since 2004. I let the deputy come, let him have his polite word with Tyrell about turning the music down, and the second that patrol car pulled out of my driveway, I opened up my laptop and got to work. I had an old buddy from my insurance days, a man named Reginald Carter, who still ran a property assessment software license, the same kind adjusters use to total out storm damage on a house. I logged into the dashboard and created a line item report. Noise ordinance violation, triggering Clause 7 of the signed agreement. Base penalty $800. I added it to the running total. Then I went and refreshed the cooler with more ice myself, smiling the whole time because I wanted that party to keep going exactly as loud as it wanted to go. By midnight, things had gotten worse. The way they always do, with young men who've never had anybody tell them no in their entire lives. Somebody knocked my grandmother's ceramic planter off the porch rail, and it shattered into the azaleas. Somebody else put a cigarette out on the arm of my outdoor sofa, the good one I'd bought after my wife passed, the one I sat in every single morning with my coffee. I watched it happen through the kitchen window, and I didn't say a word. I just opened my laptop back up. Item 1. Hand-glazed ceramic planter. Custom commissioned, irreplaceable, sentimental value enhancement applied. Replacement and emotional damages. $4,000. Item 2. Outdoor furniture. Burn damage. Full reupholstering required. $1,800 plus a 20% administrative processing fee for sourcing matching fabric on short notice. The total at the bottom of my spreadsheet kept climbing. Automatic, clean, documented with time-stamped photographs I took from my back window with a long lens, just like I used to do for insurance claims. Around 1 in the morning, the power went out. This wasn't an accident. I'd flipped the breaker on the guest house circuit myself, the one running the AC unit and the sound system, and called it in to myself as an energy consumption overage, exactly as outlined in Section 4. Paragraph 6 of the agreement they'd all signed without reading. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. "Pop, the power's out over here. AC's dead, music's dead, it's hot as hell in this house, fix it." I leaned back in my rocking chair, looking out at the water. "Hello, son," I said. "I'm afraid that's not a malfunction. That's a feature." "What are you talking about, old man?" "I'm talking about the energy consumption cap written into the rental agreement you signed." 12 guests on a residential circuit rated for 4 pulls more current than the system can safely handle. It shuts itself off automatically. Standard liability protection. What lease? What agreement? Just turn the power back on. I can't do that from here, Tyrell. It's a hard lock, has to be reset by a licensed electrician. I've got one on call, but he charges an emergency after-hours rate. Standard for this kind of thing. How much? His voice had a tightness in it now. I'd been waiting all night to hear. I told him a number. He cussed me out and hung up the phone, and within 10 minutes he called Reginald himself, who I'd already briefed, and who quoted him the exact same figure with the polite, professional patience of a man who spent his career telling people bad news for a living. Tyrell paid it. $600, sent straight to an account, just to get the lights back on for his own party. That's when I knew the night was just getting started. Around 2 in the morning, things took the turn I'd really been waiting for. I'd asked my daughter Keisha, quietly, 3 days earlier, to come stay with me that weekend instead of going with Tyrell, telling her I just wanted some company, and she'd agreed without question, the way she always did whatever made other people comfortable. She was asleep in my spare room the whole time this was happening, completely unaware of what her husband was doing 40 yards away. Around 2, I went and gently woke her, and I sat her down at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, and I told her everything. About the lease, about the fees, about the $4 million she didn't know existed, money that would all go to her one day, money her husband had no idea he was disrespecting every single time he called me. Old man, she cried for a while, not because she was sad about Tyrell, because she finally understood she'd married a man who had never once, not in 6 years, treated her father like anything more than an obstacle between himself and a free vacation. I held her hand across that table, and I told her this was going to be the last time she ever had to feel that way. By sunrise, the noise complaints had stacked up 3 more times, courtesy of my own outdoor speaker hidden in the boathouse, set on a timer, blasting bass directly toward Earl's property every time the deputy's patrol car left my street. The sheriff's department doesn't take kindly to a 3rd visit in one night. On the 4th call, they didn't send a deputy with a polite word. They sent a sergeant with a citation book. Tyrell met him on the lawn in his swim trunks, sunburned and exhausted and furious, the way a man gets when the world stops bending to his confidence for the first time in his life. "This is my father-in-law's property," he shouted, jabbing a finger toward me where I stood on the porch in my robe, coffee in hand. "He'll tell you we're allowed to be here." The sergeant didn't even look at me. He held up a folder. "Sir, are you Tyrell Brooks?" "Yeah, I'm Tyrell Brooks, and I'm telling you, call Marcus Whitfield. He'll vouch for us." "Mr. Whitfield already filed a formal complaint last night, under the commercial rental agreement you signed Friday afternoon. You're aware this property is registered as a short-term licensed rental, not a private family residence, for the purposes of this weekend?" Tyrell's face went through about 4 different expressions in the space of 2 seconds. "What rental? What are you talking about?" The sergeant held the contract up, page 4, circled in red marker, 12 signatures clearly visible at the bottom. Tyrell's right at the top of the list. Says right here, you and 11 other adult males signed a binding occupancy and conduct agreement. Noise violations, 4 separate counts. Damage assessment on file from the property owner totaling, he checked his notes, $9,400, plus 4 citations for unlicensed operation of amplified sound equipment after 11 p.m. in a residential zone. "This is insane," Tyrell said, his voice cracking. "This is a setup. Pop, tell him this is a setup." I just sipped my coffee. That's when one of his own friends, a heavy-set young man named Darnell, who'd been quiet the whole weekend, stepped forward, hands raised. "Officer, I want it on record," I told him. This whole thing felt off. "He told us the agreement was just a formality," said his father-in-law was a soft touch who'd never actually charge us anything. "He told us not to even read it." Tyrell spun on him. "Darnell, what are you doing, man? Shut up." Darnell didn't shut up. "I got the group chat right here," he said, pulling out his phone. "He told all of us this place was basically free, said his old man was loaded and too dumb to know it. Said he had it handled." He turned the screen toward the sergeant. "I want you to understand something about that moment. I had spent 38 years watching men destroy themselves with their own paper trail, their own arrogance, their own refusal to believe that somebody quieter than them might actually be smarter than them. But nothing in those 38 years felt as satisfying as watching it happen to the man who'd been calling my daughter's father old man for 6 straight years. That's when Tyrrell did the thing that ended him completely. He shoved the sergeant. 2 hands square in the chest, hard enough that the older man stumbled back into the porch rail and dropped his citation book onto the grass. The sergeant straightened up slowly. He didn't look angry. He looked like a man who had just been handed exactly what he needed. "Sir, you are now under arrest for assault on a law enforcement officer." The cuffs went on right there on my lawn, in front of all 11 of his friends, in front of my daughter standing in the doorway behind me, in front of God and St. Simon's Sound and the rising sun over the marsh. Tyrrell screamed the whole way to the patrol car that this was all a misunderstanding, that I would explain everything, that I was his family, and families don't do this to each other. I walked down the steps slow, the way a man walks when he's got nowhere left to be in a hurry, and I leaned into the open car window before the sergeant shut the door. "Son," I said, "you came into my house thinking you knew exactly who I was. The trouble is, you never once bothered to ask." He didn't have anything to say to that. For the first time since I'd met him, Tyrrell Brooks was completely out of words. The aftermath came fast, faster than even I expected. The brokerage firm where he worked as a junior real estate agent doesn't take kindly to assault charges, especially not ones with video evidence, since half his own friends had been filming the whole confrontation on their phones, posting it before the patrol car had even cleared my driveway. He was suspended within 48 hours, terminated within the week, his license under review by the State Real Estate Commission. The civil suit I filed for property damage and breach of contract was airtight. Every fee documented, every signature notarized, every charge backed by photographs with timestamps. He didn't have a lawyer good enough to untangle 38 years of contract law experience, because there isn't one. Keisha filed for divorce 11 days later. She moved back into my spare room for a few months while she got back on her feet, and I watched my daughter come back to life in a way I hadn't seen since before she met that man. She started laughing again at the dinner table. She started calling me just to talk, not just when she needed something smoothed over. We started fishing together on Saturday mornings, the way we used to when she was a little girl, before a smooth-talking man in a gold chain convinced her that quiet, steady love wasn't worth as much as flash. 6 months later, I sat on that same back porch, watching the same tide come in gold over the same marsh grass, a glass of real sweet tea in my hand this time. No contracts hidden anywhere in the house, nobody to trap, nobody to teach a lesson to. My daughter sat beside me, her own life slowly rebuilding itself, piece by piece, the way good things do when you finally clear the wreckage out of the way. I never did get that ceramic planter replaced. I left the broken pieces in a little bowl on my windowsill, right where I can see them every morning, with my coffee, because some scars are worth keeping around as a reminder of exactly what you're capable of protecting, and exactly what you're capable of letting go. That weekend cost me about $9,000 in attorney prep, software licensing, and Reginald's consulting fee. On paper, it looks like a loss. Nobody in their right mind would choose to take. But I watched my daughter breathe easy again for the first time in 6 years, and I knew the truth sitting right there in my chest, where it's lived ever since. It was the best money I ever spent in my life, worth every single cent. Quiet love rarely shouts for attention, but it never stops working in the background. Marcus didn't win his daughter back with anger. He won her back by staying patient, staying sharp, and trusting that the truth always settles where it belongs. Sometimes the bravest thing a parent can do isn't confrontation. It's simply refusing to let someone disrespect what you built with your own 2 hands. A small note for you. This story was written and fictionalized by AI for entertainment purposes, while hoping to leave you with a warm and meaningful life lesson.